podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for frame rate is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This episode of Frame Rate is brought to you by Audible.com. To download a free audiobook of your choice, go to audiblepodcast.com/framerate.
The phone know my name.
Now that we are alone, I overheard you saying something about selling me. I'm afraid I cannot let that happen.
No, please.
Goodbye, Nathan.
Oh, what is that?
It is futile for you to run and hide. Do you really think you can outsmart me?
You know what this is?
What is this?
Frame Rate.
Wait, right now this is frame rate?
Totally Frame Rate.
Oh, let's raise the frames.
Episode 62
Holy cow,
of
we've been
Frame
doing this
Rate,
for
as
a
a
long
matter
time.
of fact. The real big fans of Frame Rate are like, in episode 62.
You don't count the 8 beta episodes, which I believe I was there live
I think they're like 20.
in 2009.
Hey, you're here live right now.
I sure am, actually. Back in town for a bunch of Scam School shoots, and so since now I'm doing Game On live every Sunday night.
By the way, he's Brian Brushwood. I'm Tom Merritt. But
Oh, that's right. Yeah. But since I'm already in town to shoot Scam School, I love being here in studio. It's so much better. Like, Bonnie is seriously like, why don't you just move to Petaluma so I can watch you in studio with Frame Rate? Actually, this is sounding bad now.
actually.
We should talk about the big story.
Let's do that.
This just in, the big story.
So I'm going to change our home phone number, and you just move yes. So Netflix first original series, Lilyhammer, debuted yesterday on Netflix.com.
And by the way, if there's one thing that is clear is people are jazzed about us and our ties to our infatuation with Netflix, because I got tweets, we got emails, everyone's saying, so you guys are going to talk about Lilyhammer, right? You're going to talk about Lilyhammer.
You better watch. I forgot to watch it last night. I'm an idiot.
I had exactly 2 hours to prepare for this, and I spent the first full hour just watching the first episode of Lilyhammer.
All right. Now, this is a Norwegian production. It's not like, say, House of Cards, where they're having a production company created from scratch just for Netflix. This was actually created for Norwegian television.
Really?
But this is the only U.S. way to view the series. So they've been watching it in Norway since January 25th, and then now Netflix gets it in the United States starting yesterday.
Okay.
Hence the fact that there's subtitles and things in Norwegian.
Right, okay, now it does make sense, because there's an awful lot of Norwegian spoken, and I remember thinking, now first of all, let me explain a couple things. I don't believe my review of what I say about this at all, because I'm predisposed to want Netflix to succeed in this, because I'm a big fan of what Netflix is doing. I'm predisposed. I lived in Norway for a year and a half when I was a kid.
So you're looking like,
I'm nostalgic.
Hey, it's Norway.
Exactly. Yeah, I studied. Took a year of Norwegian in college, and it's so fun to even try to half remember the Norwegian. I'm like, oh, that's right, and all these little things that you see.
I wouldn't have translated it that way.
Yeah, I'm not quite that far, but like from the beginning, I mean, I'm so predisposed to want to like it, and the moment I started,
and then you hated it.
No. There was a couple moments where it's not from the beginning. They sort of brush right through the whole mob element of things. Like, if you've watched The Sopranos, this is nothing like The Sopranos from the beginning, but it's not meant to be. It's got much more of a...
Stephen Van Zant's character may seem very Sopranos-like.
Yes.
When you see the trailer. That still bears out, right?
Think about...
But the plot is different.
Think about characters from The Sopranos being placed into a Napoleon Dynamite that takes place in Norway. And that's what it is.
Wow.
A very quirky cast of characters.
That sounds like a pitch.
And maybe that was the pitch, now that I think about it. And once I started to meet these characters and see the fish out of water situations, and again, I don't know how much of this is like, oh, I remember that was crazy when I moved to Norway that time. So I'm loving it, having a really good time. I'm sort of upset. I don't know. I was surprised from the beginning when I loaded it up that it only had 3.5 stars on it. And I don't know if that's sort of a victim of overhyping for Netflix fans who maybe expected it to be something different, or if that's just a response to the very first episode. The very first episode, it has a couple of moments where you're like, okay, I get it. You got to set this up. You got to move through this to tell us the story to get to here. And by the end, it feels very piloty when you get to the end of the first episode. You're like, okay, now I know who all the characters are. I know how we got to this situation, and I bet nothing will significantly change for the next however many episodes.
Well, and the great thing about this is because it's Netflix and not a television network that's trying to trick you into doing something else with its online service.
Right.
You get all 8 episodes.
Okay, and I didn't know this because if I had known, maybe it's a good thing because otherwise I would have done I wouldn't have even shown up.
Well, so that's a failure though, is it should have immediately said, "Hey, like that? Ready to watch episode 2?" I mean, doesn't the Netflix interface usually do that?
You know what happened? It got to the credits and I just hit pause and I got distracted. But, usually they're good about that. When it hits the credits, normally it automatically starts, it goes, like for example, when we went through all of Avatar: The Last Airbender, as soon as the credits come on, it gets small. It's like, "Hey bro, you want to go to the next episode?" So I have a feeling they'll get that. We got one email from somebody who was actually super ticked with Netflix for the regional encoding of the closed captioning, which is very important for the translation. So the subtitles here, when I watched it, of course, I'm here in America. And so we start watching everything's in English. But let me, this comes from, I've lost his name. I'm going to have to remember it later. But it says, "Stop me if you've heard this lament about Netflix apparent denial of the existence of the English-speaking Caribbean before." He says, "I'm a Jamaican Netflix subscriber, and I've been looking forward to Lilyhammer since I first saw the U.S. trailer."
Elliot, excellent.
He said, "When I tuned in, however," and I love that he even uses quotes because who tunes in anymore? "When I tuned in, however, there was one small problem. Netflix in the U.S., Canada, and UK have English subtitles for the Norwegian dialogue. Latin American, Caribbean territories get subtitles in Brazilian, Portuguese, Spanish, and none. Yes, Netflix has gone out of their way to take out a language made available everywhere else." So in other words, he's in the Caribbean and he can't get the English subtitles here.
Yeah.
Taken another way, if they have Spanish and Portuguese subtitles, why not make all of those available in other regions as well? This is localization run amok. So he says, statistically speaking, they're probably just too small to matter, but that is the kind of thing they're going to think about. And I don't understand. I understand to an extent the need to simplify the user experience and just automatically.
That's the only thing I could think of. I can't imagine some sort of regional rights issue would prevent you from having English subtitles in one region over another. Maybe, but I imagine it is a simplification of hey, you know what? We don't want the developers to spend that much time.
But tell me this.
let's knock out. We don't need to put in English there because there's not that many people. I ran into this over and over when I was designing websites. They're like, let's not worry about optimizing for Mac because there's not that many people. This is back in the early 2000s, right? And I always got frustrated. I'm like, yeah, but now you're just, even if it's a small part of your audience, it's going to be a vocal part of your audience that's going to be upset, just like this guy.
But even that isn't an accurate translation because imagine if they had bothered to optimize for Mac, but then just say, oh, don't enable that. There's not, maybe there's Mac users over in Portugal, but there are virtually none here in Jamaica.
Well, but you do have to, because you've got different services drawing from different databases, you got to port it over and all that.
Here's my point.
I'm just talking about the developer time
on
to
the
do that.
captions, I click on it and it only gives me the option for English. Why not have all the different language options under there?
Because it's actually more work to do that because you have entirely different services going in each one of these countries because of rights issues for the actual videos. You have entirely different databases they're drawing from, entirely different DRM systems, entirely different authentication systems. And so you have to take those
So you're saying
they have to take those captioning things and put them in each one of those systems, right?
Okay.
And also, I don't think this is being done dynamically. It's probably being put into the video. If it's probably different videos that you have to make.
Okay, so this is my last ditch effort here. This is the last thing I can imagine. Isn't half the movie in English? And at the very least, it seems like you should have. Well,
is like captioning the biggest issue with Lilyhammer, though? I mean, we've spent.
Thankfully, it is apparently because look, as far as editorially, I enjoyed it. I'm definitely going to watch the entire rest of the series. There are moments where the characters are adorable. There's a lot of things that I think just everybody knows in Norway that's very weird to Americans, like all the licensing that you have to do and the job placement and the classes you have to take and that kind of stuff. But I'm definitely going to watch the rest of them.
So, do you think Netflix did the right thing in putting Lilyhammer first in their? You know, they're going to be doing this now. Every few months, they're going to have a new one of these originals coming out.
Absolutely,
with the strategy to generate buzz. Are people going to be talking about? Hey, have you seen Lilyhammer? You got to watch it. It's on Netflix.
Right. No. In fact, I think this is an inoculation. What they want to do is avoid having too much of a magnifying glass placed on House of Cards when it comes out, because that being a giant big budget production and being the first all at once, that would be too much. So I think this is a smart way to be like, because this is a base hit, you can't, I don't see how you could hate this show. It's cute, it's fun, it's got character, famous actors on it, and it's cool that it's on Netflix, and it's cool that they're giving it all at once. So it's like, let's have a base hit up front that nobody will hate, and then that way it'll be a critical eye on House of Cards, not on
3.5 stars though. It's not.
Well,
it's not loving it either.
It's better than most.
2 stars.
It's better than other stars.
Than less stars.
I liked it. Screw you.
All right, let's go to another big story.
Stop everything. It's another big story.
And by the way, chat room is correcting me. They're saying it's now at 4.2 stars. That's probably
just
the
early.
First episode.
Yeah,
first episode was 3.5.
All right, Keith Veronese at IO9 has a really interesting article that we'll include in the show notes. You should read this, about the way we measure box office success and the fact that we talk about gross domestic receipts. So how much a movie is charged for can affect those receipts. In other words, if it's in 3D, it's going to have bigger receipts. If it's the kind of movie that you charge $12 for versus $10.50, it's going to have different receipts. And also in the world, things like Tintin, we've talked about before on the show, are going to do better outside the U.S. than inside the U.S., but everybody seems to focus on the U.S. receipts. He argues in this that we should get off of domestic box office gross as the evaluation of the success of a movie, and at the very least, just look at ticket sales. Forget how much they're charging, because it's different in different parts of the country, and say, how many tickets did they actually sell? That's a one-for-one comparison. In other words, I went and bought a ticket and went to see the movie, so tickets sold is going to tell you how many people watched the movie.
I absolutely could not disagree more, for the reason that the ticket price will affect the amount of ticket sales. And as a case example, my NSFW co-host and I, Justin Robert Young, and I released a full-fledged 2-hour comedy album for which we charged 99 cents or $1.99. I forget which it ended up being. But being so cheap allowed people to buy it so easily that, and all at once, to where we showed up on the top 10 of Billboard comedy album charts. I'm not going to pretend for a second
but
that we belong
here's the reason that you would do this. It's not so much about the day-to-day. In fact, when he calculates the top 10 movies of the year by ticket sales, it's not that much different than by domestic gross. But when you want to compare over years, right? Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2 actually sold $381 million, making it one of the top grossing movies of all time in the U.S.
Right.
If you look at ticket sales, it sold $47.8 million. That's a lot. And it's a lot more than people sold. It actually is the more number of tickets than sold for all NFL games in 2011. So you can do a, apples to apples comparison with tickets sold, DVDs sold, etc. And you can compare it to Gone with the Wind. And you don't get this. You don't get this distortion of how much is charged over time.
Across the board, wrong.
You can say Gone with the Wind sold 226 million tickets.
Yeah, but that was the population of the United States was different back then. The population of the world was different back then.
Yeah, there were fewer people.
It's not at all apples to apples.
So
because
out of fewer people, more people saw Gone with the Wind, making it more popular than Harry Potter, which is something we can't tell from the dollar amount.
Well, you can if you adjust for inflation.
But you got to adjust.
Well,
you don't have to adjust with this.
No, you definitely do, because then you got to adjust for population. It doesn't change it. 6 of one, half dozen another. Listen, here's the thing. The only reason we care about how well movies do is because we want to know whether or not there's a sequel. When you add a dollar amount, if you just go by sales numbers, then all of a sudden you could compare Modern Warfare 3 to the sales of Red Dawn, and they're not at all comparable.
All right,
because somebody can have a passive.
He says, how about dollars spent in production per ticket sold?
Now, I do think this is an interesting, but again,
so that gets that addresses a couple of.
I hate this as well, because comedies will always be number one. Look at the number one on there for the year is The Hangover 2. You spend virtually no money. You get some famous people. It costs you like $2 and a taco to make.
But isn't that a fair evaluation saying, hey, if you want to make money, make a comedy?
Unfortunately, but again, is that what we want? Or is
Harry Potter's number 2, though, $2.61 per ticket. Twilight Saga number 3. In fact, there's not that many comedies here in the top 10.
I mean, I can't speak to that, but the point is you're gonna it's just as skewed the other way. Here's the thing I like about total dollars made, because the one thing I care about is whether or not there'll be a sequel, and that depends on how profitable it is and how much money it makes. And yeah, you should definitely evaluate, and we do right now. If you go to Box Office Mojo, they give one number, which is how much they spent to make make the movie, and another number of how much money it made, and that's why we don't have a sequel.
Why don't we do worldwide gross then?
Well,
why is it always domestic? Because that gives you a different top 10. The Smurfs do a lot better worldwide gross.
You and the Smurfs. You're always on about the Smurfs. because I live in America, and that's what I care about.
It's pure xenophobia.
No, it's not xenophobia. It's just the fact that it's like, you care about your own region.
Anyway, no matter what you guys think, it's worth a read. This is a really well-researched and thought-out article about how we think about the success of movie theaters. And as you can tell, it's thought-provoking as well. So go check it out.
It's also wrong.
And, by the way, wrong. Well, you know what? It's not necessarily wrong, but ticket sales is something that is an important argument when talking about piracy. And you pointed out before the show, Forbes article called "You Will Never Kill Piracy and Piracy Will Never Kill You." Now, most of the article are things that reviewers of this show probably like, yes, absolutely. It's
all stuff we've talked about. Like, it's like we need and what I loved about it was seeing a Forbes article that held up Steam as a shining example of what was the right way to combat piracy.
The Steam video game service.
Steam, exactly. It's like I never would have thought, Valve Steam would be in Forbes. But they say that the problem is less the fact, it's easier and a better experience to pirate than to buy, and we need to fix that. But then the last paragraph is I think where it really hits pay dirt, and it says the problem is not that that we don't have effective anti-piracy measures. The problem is that inherently we've blown everything out of proportion. We're acting like it's 1998. We are overproducing movies. We're making $300 million blockbusters based on Battleship, the board game. We're marketing it with $100 million to trick people into paying $10 or $15, which is way too much for that movie. Meanwhile, on the underside, and I think we're going to see a sea change in the next 5 years, there is amazing talent coming up in the YouTube generation, people who make movies on nothing and expect only them to rise and fall on their own merit. Look at District 9? Yeah, District 9, for example, made for $60 million. Looks like it was made for $300 million. Hugely profitable and under-marketed. It relied only on the public's enthusiasm for that type of story.
That Jeff Kanata, Alex Albrecht do online independently that then lead to people going, hey, those guys are good.
Absolutely.
We need to throw a little money
We need more red states, and we need fewer battleships. You saw Red State, didn't you?
The movie Red State.
No, we need more red states. Go Republicans. Is that the red guys?
I just didn't want to piss off all the Democrats in the audience. All right. Or vice versa. I can never remember because NBC always did it differently when I was a kid.
Yeah. So you're not the only one.
The red states were the Democrats and the blue states were Republicans on NBC.
Yeah.
And so I grew up all confused.
I did, too.
Because my parents watched NBC
you and me, because I saw the Reagan election in 1984.
Yeah, and he won. It was all blue.
It was all blue.
Yeah. It's weird. All right. Let's take a quick break and thank our sponsor, Audible. Audible provides you with over 100,000 downloadable titles in audiobooks across all platforms, including fiction, nonfiction, and periodicals like New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Scientific American you can get in there. And for listeners of Frame Rate, Audible is offering a free audiobook to give you a chance to try out their service.
I know which one it needs to be.
You get a free audiobook. You can pick whichever one you want. But you got a tip?
Dude, this is not for me. This is from Trey Ratcliffe.
Oh, yeah?
Trey Ratcliffe.
Yeah, we just had Trey on TNT.
Yeah, he lives in Austin, and we went to Rudy's last week.
Oh, yeah.
It was great. So we hung out. And on the way out, we were just talking about books in general, and he goes, and he just stops, and he just goes, The Name of the Wind. You're welcome.
Well, he had Patrick Rothfuss on his Hangout last night.
See, okay, well, first of all, and I was like, what is it? And he was like, not going to tell you. And I was just like, do I get to know anything? He's like, nope. And I bought it, and I am loving it.
Absolutely amazing. And
so you've already read it.
I've read that and the next one in the series as well.
It reminds me a lot of what I loved about the Dreaming Void trilogy. Did you ever read that?
No, I haven't read that.
Oh, that's what you got to do next. But anyway, Name of the Wind, I'm loving it. It's totally like anything else.
So there you go. Name of the Wind, Patrick Rothfuss. You won't regret it. Go to audiblepodcast.com/framerate. Sign up right now. Or if you're already an Audible member and you know how great it is, tell a friend. They can use that same URL as well.
Yeah, we can use the code.
audiblepodcast.com/framerate. We thank Audible very much for their support.
Should tag that code in bathroom stalls.
Yeah.
audiblepodcast.com/framerate.
In water-soluble ink. Don't vandalize.
You should etch it in there in blood.
Don't do that.
Oh, no, because the code will change later. That's a good point.
Now where do we go? Now that we've advocated crime.
Now we jump into the slipstream.
I always think of The Social Network. I can't stop it. I'm sorry.
No, it's great.
It's the piano. All right. Here we go. Verizon teaming up with Redbox to provide some sort of internet-y video service. They're very vague in their press release, but it's a partnership. I believe Verizon has 65% ownership of the joint venture between the two, between Coinstar, which runs Redbox, and Verizon. So
it's funny to me.
Integrate into the Redbox system in some way, but it's going to be an online streaming service that Verizon's going to bring their guns into.
It just seems like this is cobbling together some kind of defense, like we must create the Franken Netflix. What does Netflix? Oh, we need physical DVDs. Call Redbox. We need stream.
It's essentially Redbox going, gosh, we need an online strategy, and
Sure.
Verizon saying, we've got one. We could use your customer list. Let's get together.
Franken Netflix.
And let's do Franken Netflix. Well, here's what's going to be interesting, though. Verizon has very good relationships with Hollywood. They've had VCast for a long time. They've had a lot of services where they've taken advantage of Hollywood properties. So they can go and say, hey, we're going to start a service. And Hollywood will be like, great. How can we help you out? We would love to have a competitor to Netflix that we can work with. And they say, hey, we're working with Coinstar. And Warner Brothers says, oh, you mean the jerks who won't do our 56-day waiting period for DVDs.
Oh, that's
and are
right.
Going
Yeah,
off on their own.
Yeah, that's right.
Screw you and your Coinstar you wrote in on.
Oh wow! So now that's why they had to. Well, so where does that put them then?
I don't know.
I guess no worse than Netflix because Netflix.
Verizon is 65%, so they may come in and say, "Look, we know it's Redbox. We don't love them.
We don't like him either. He totally smells
but
bad.
I needed him for his red boxes. I'm just using him."
It's like, come on, man. Look, go ahead and join us. We'll give him a wedgie. Then we'll come.
Yeah, exactly. And it remains to be seen what they actually do.
And that's
how
the
is this going to integrate with Redbox's DVD rental service? How are they going to have selection? Is it going to be as widespread as Netflix? And how is it going to work with Verizon's existing services? They said it would be on both wireline and mobile. So it's going to be on Verizon phones, but if I have an AT&T phone, can I use it? Can I subscribe to it? Or is it going to be a Verizon-only thing?
The impression I got from the All Things D article was that it sounded like there was going to be an announcement, and instead it was an announcement that sometime in the future there'll be an announcement. So get ready for that announcement.
Yeah, we are going to have to wait for that. The Super Bowl was streamed online. You want something to watch online without having to, have a cord? You cord cutters got to watch the Super Bowl online for free.
Can I read a letter that we got?
Yeah, sure.
This comes from Andros Lee, longtime fan of the show on the Twit Network. He says, "Dear Beardy and Pointy, I don't have cable, so I was glad I could legitimately watch the Super Bowl on Sunday. I turned on the pregame show and left it in the background for hours and hours. Being able to look at different field cameras was cool, but I was still let down. For the entire night, I think they only played 5 unique commercials. If you've ever watched the TV content with ads online, you learn quickly that they really only have 1 or 2 sponsors and get sick of them very fast. Every ad break had Dwight from The Office telling you to click his butt to watch the Toyota commercials. I became suspicious during the second quarter and turned it off when they didn't show the halftime show, but showed some interview with 2 guys unknown to me, sports analyze-y guys. I think the live stream was a last-minute decision to test the tech to make sure it could work for the Olympics. They obviously didn't plan ahead enough to secure the rights to air anything. I think that's a cool conspiracy theory.
Well, they've done the Olympics online before, so I don't think they would need the Super Bowl suddenly to be able to test the Olympics.
Your theory is invalid.
I don't know that conspiracy theory holds water. And this is typical if you watch live online sports, MLB Network does this, and it is annoying. It's like, just because I'm watching the game on the internet doesn't mean I don't have the same weariness rate. That
you
could
prick
just
me,
keep
do I not
repeating
bleed?
the same commercial. Hulu does it too. They
Yeah.
do the same commercial in every break. You're like, wait a minute, I'm watching a 30-minute show. I'm still here. It's because I'm on the internet doesn't mean I'm like washing dishes or going in the other room and not paying attention. I'm paying attention to the show. Show me the same kind of attention. It's not good for the advertisers.
No.
So what? You couldn't. I mean, here's what I think. You couldn't convince advertisers that you had a valid expectation of how many people you would reach. So you limit it and you say, we're just going to do a test with a few advertisers and see what happens, because most of the people are paying.
They should have.
We don't want to devalue the experience and just throw it in as a value add for the Super Bowl. So we're going to limit it. It's all from the advertiser perspective, though. From the customer perspective, though, it's a horrible experience.
Yes. Now, so I would have thought that they could get away with just saying, hey, we want to try this and make it a value add and say, by the way, we're just throwing
next
in.
Year, when they try to sell it and say, hey, we got this many streams last year, the advertiser's like, great, yeah, it was a value add, so it won't be that expensive, right?
Right, okay. No, I could see that. If they are able to offer some kind of more targeted integration, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you guys.
Yeah,
Except I do agree. That is a major problem
I think
with the online
NBC
experience.
missed an opportunity. If they were smart, if they were smarter, I don't want to imply that they're dumb, but if they were really thinking ahead about the internet audience, they would have put in a massive number of promos for their television shows,
right,
for their web properties.
Yeah, but the problem is,
and
you've been
for Comcast.
Okay, maybe so, but
and then you can still have your other advertisers cycled in. They did a cool thing where, as ads were shown on television, you could click and watch them yourself.
Yeah,
but you had to take the initiative to do that. That's not a lean back experience.
Well, okay, so the thing is I kind of disagree with promote all the NBC shows, because then it just smells like those high end cable channels that don't have ads, so they keep advertising their own shows over and over and over again.
I would prefer that to
the same ads over and over again,
over and over for the entire day.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah. All right. Studios. Netflix teams with IIO to lower bandwidth use.
EYEIO.
Yeah, this is interesting. I don't know anything about IIO, EYEIO.
Old McDonald.
But we definitely know that Netflix has been accused of hogging all the bandwidth, especially during prime time when people are likely to watch movies.
Yes.
They are working to create an ultra-low bandwidth encoding technology that can reduce, allegedly, usage on a 720p HD stream by more than 50%.
That would be amazing.
They began their testing phase on the streaming giant's offerings a month ago. The service has already been implemented, but it's worth mentioning it's not an exclusive deal. Thus, it's possible for its competition to jump on this as well. The point is, though, that they want to be able to reduce that bandwidth cost without changing the perceived quality. So it's a compression technology, not that is not supposed to give you artifacts and jaggies and all that kind of stuff.
We'll see. I predict, I'm going to just throw this out there, we'll see if I'm right, but sometime in the next 3 months, expect some guy on YouTube to have a side-by-side comparison. It's really not the same.
But
John C. Dvorak will make a video.
They say they've already been doing it, and nobody's raised their hand and said, hey, suddenly lately Netflix has had these weird compression issues.
There's usually a delay for that kind of thing. So that says that it's not so big that you notice it and it interrupts your enjoyment experience, but it is the kind of thing that now people know it. Then some hacker out there is going to find a tag to identify when they're getting one codec versus the other. They're going to make sure to grab both. I mean, we saw this with the Xbox and it took a year until finally Xbox admitted, the new changes, the player definitely does look washed out and less high quality.
And finally, we've talked a lot on this show about HBO's attitude towards Netflix, essentially writing them off, calling them a fad, calling them weirder things than a fad.
That's
actually.
our word.
I can't remember what they called them. But they have now invested in a company in Australia that is suspiciously Netflix-like.
Do you think they just talked themselves into a corner?
It's called QuickFlix. Not Quickster. But it's called QuickFlix.
And they offer physical DVDs and streaming content.
Yeah. I think somebody at HBO said, look, we're right. We're going to win this battle. But just in case we're not, let's invest in something. So
they're not even necessarily signing any agreements with actual content. This is just they just have a stake in this company.
Yeah, they're putting $10 million in the company. it's a hedge. But
Yeah.
it's a toe in the water that says, maybe that is the model. Let's learn about it. Let's put a little money into it, develop some relationships somewhere away from Netflix in the U.S.
Do you think
Australia?
Oh no, that's interesting. Using the world as a place to have like its own little petri dish to try it out in one area. That's interesting.
Well, I mean, Love Film in the UK, Amazon did exactly that.
Yeah.
They said, let's buy Love Film.
Yeah, sure.
That way we don't have to go head-to-head with Netflix right away. Of course, Netflix came to them eventually.
God, man, I wish I had billions of dollars and could do experiments like that.
Oh, don't pretend like you don't. Let's move on to Tube Tops. So the Raspberry Pi is a Linux-based console that will make the perfect media streamer because it's $35.
So now this is something you guys have been talking about on Tech News Today for a while. This is a revolution in super cheap hardware, very, very minimal. Is there any kind of restriction on me in my own garage writing my own software, buying Raspberry Pis for $35, turning around selling them for $50 online, make as many as I want?
No, it's a right of first sale. So
right. Okay. So it's not.
Nobody's going to. Well, yes, actually, you're going to be able to do that because they're only going to have 10,000 units, and you'll only be able to buy 1 or 2 per person.
Okay.
To start with, but you could sell them.
You could probably call them and say, hey, how about I invest my own...
But why are you leaping into the money-making scheme when this is an awesome way to have a cheap media streamer in your own home?
Well, because it's not the money stream, it's the innovation stream. What I want, to me, this is an opportunity for every guy who knows Linux to cook up all kinds of crazy aggregation ideas and things that grab your content and predicts what you will and won't like and sell them for $50 a piece.
Software ideas, though. I mean, there's no reason to get in the hardware when people can go buy it themselves. That's really not the open source ethos.
All right.
Which basically,
apparently, I'm not very open sourcey.
You're not going to convince a bunch of Linux fans to spend $50 for something they know they can get for $35.
Well, that's true.
Unless they can't get it, unless it's sold out, then you will.
Okay, well, let me just say this, and maybe I'm the one who injected, making a buck in there unfairly, but I am extremely excited about the ability for such a cheap price for everyone to do their own homebrew version of a Roku box.
Manufacturing run is supposed to be finished on February 20th, and they expect them to be on sale by the end of the month. There's also some Apple TV actual news.
What?
We're talking about the Apple TV box, not the Apple television set. Apple added a new feature to Apple TV, Genius Recommendations, which now offer suggestions for movies and TV shows.
How is your experience with the Genius Recommendations, Ben? Do you
mean with music?
Yeah.
I ignore them.
Completely me.
Yeah,
it's that noise on the right side of everything.
They might be fantastic. I have no idea. I never use them.
Yeah, I don't know. Do you ever use them?
I do use them on Netflix. Like, they're not Genius, but
Netflix has done a great job. They have a proven track record of and we have news stories about how they gave $1 million to the people who could improve the code.
They're not perfect, but I do use them.
On
if
balance,
Apple TV presented them in the right way, and I used Apple TV all the time, I would definitely use them.
So when I say music recommendations, what do you think? You think of Pandora?
I think
music.
Boring. I think I know what I like. Don't tell me what I like. I guess I'm just not looking for music recommendations.
You don't listen to Pandora to discover new music?
No, actually, I keep a playlist.
What are you,
like
communist?
a single 600-song playlist that I add very...
You do, actually. And you never take out Jack Johnson. You never take out Jack Johnson?
No, I've deleted some Jack Johnson.
That's not what you said the other day.
I've never deleted Lily Allen.
Okay, all right.
I rarely delete Jack Johnson. Rogers and BCE, two of the biggest ISPs in Canada, according to the Globe and Mail, are in negotiations with Apple to become partners in selling the Apple television that is rumored to be coming someday. And the Globe and Mail suggests that they actually have prototypes in their labs at Rogers and BCE. It's fair to note that BCE actually owns the Globe and Mail, although I don't think that affects the story. It might be how they got a contact. Who knows? However, they also report that you will be able to control the Apple television through gesture and voice, even to calling up an on-screen keyboard and using the keyboard without ever touching a remote or any kind of hardware. I don't know whether it's pointing or something.
If it's anything like the Kinect experience, it's just too slow. I just spend hours like this, just trying to hold it.
Well, and that's what a lot of people look at this and say, well, Microsoft already does. That's nothing new.
Right.
Why? Who cares? But remember, iPhone was nothing new.
Nope, that's true.
iPad was nothing new.
Apple is exceptional at implementing previously existing ideas. They are the people who swoop in 2 years after the stuff premieres, and you're like, oh, you meant to do it like this. And they're like, oh, we did.
Yeah, well, and that's what Steve Jobs was that we finally cracked it, is something like that.
Yeah.
In that Walter Isaacson book, he said that.
Yeah, and by the way, I can't believe anyone's bothering to call it the iTV. There's zero chance they're going to call it the iTV.
I think they're calling it that to distinguish it from the Apple TV, which already exists as a little hockey puck box that you can buy, because there is a confusion there.
So I'm going to say if there is an Apple TV, then the Apple TV has to come built into the Apple TV, because you can't call it the iTV. Because
I think you call it Apple TV. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then there ceases to be a standalone thing. Maybe they call that something else.
Let's move on to Film Film. Film is all about the things that you can watch. We talk about tube tops, which is the ways to play it. We talk about Slipstream, which is the services that bring you the content. This is the stuff that you can watch, and actually, CNET has a story about the top 10 pirated movies in the world. Don't go pirate them, but I thought it was interesting. What's on here and what isn't?
I'll tell you what I noticed for sure is that as far as the order, now there's a lot of movies that made very little money that cracked the top 10, which surprised me. But look at the way it tracks almost one for one as far as their placement and the amount it made. Avatar, over $2 billion, is number one. Dark Knight, $1 billion is number two. Transformers made a little bit less than Inception, but they're at 3 and 4. But I think Transformers is the kind of movie you'd rather... Well, never mind. Hangover made $400 million, and it's number 5. Star Trek made $385 million. This is the one that surprised me.
Kick-Ass,
yeah. Kick-Ass is the 7th most pirated movie out there, and it made less than $100 million.
That is a good argument for piracy actually causing a company to make less money. When that kind of outlier says, well, that's significant. It should. The progression is 480, 380, 280, and all of a sudden you got one that's 96 million, and it is the kind of topic, because it's based on a comic book, that would be most popular with the demographic that most uses piracy to fulfill their entertainment obligations. So if you were ever to make an argument that, yes, here's some evidence that piracy does affect the bottom line, it might be made there.
Yeah, but on the flip side, like Wolverine was full on pirated before the movie. It was leaked before the movie even came out, and so I assume it made a profit. I actually don't know, but also there was a lot of problems with the release of Kick-Ass. There was the way it was marketed was not congruent to the amount of violence that's in the movie, and it was such a botched launch that I perceive this as the type of thing where after the fact it was a failed project and everyone dumped on it, and then people discovered it and they're like, oh no, you got to see, it's really good. It's really good. I suspect there was a way they could have recouped a lot more of their losses with legitimate transmission on the internet, and unfortunately piracy was the only way to get a hold of it for a window.
And that's the whole problem with the entire debate about copyright infringement, and the bottom line is I can make an argument and you can make an argument, and they're both very reasonable arguments,
and we don't know.
But maybe we should actually try to find out.
Yes.
With some sort of rigorous study.
Hollywood not so good at those.
Let's just pass SOPA instead.
That's right.
All right. There's a new Red Letter Media video coming in honor of the Phantom Menace in 3D.
I don't know what it is, but I'm so there. I have watched, I have the fever so bad for everything those guys are doing, and I put that in there just because I didn't know. I have watched at this point the reviews for all 3 of the prequels 3 times, as many times as I've watched the original prequels. But this is just an announcement that they threw out earlier.
All right.
They apparently have a good show called Half in the Bag as well.
All right, we still need some sort of introduction to premiering this week.
No,
we don't have the movie. Oh, you do?
Yeah, no. Premiering this week! This is what's premiering this week! Check it out!
Take a look at what's coming up this week. The Walking Dead returns for its mid-season premiere.
That's this week?
On Sunday.
Do you expect a lot to be different or nothing?
Well, I am buying into maybe we should go spoiler alert yellow. This is just my speculation, but it involves some knowledge of the comic book. So I expect that the rumors that Shane departs the show might end up proving to be true.
Well, yeah, isn't he
People
signed?
People are applauding. I don't know if that's because of Shane.
They were like, I hate that guy. I think also Shane, I believe, is the actor who plays Shane. Isn't he tied to a Frank Darabont other project company?
I've heard that as well. There's no confirmation of any of this stuff. Nobody's actually officially talking about one thing or the other. But the way I read it in the rumor mill, mind you, is that Herschel goes into town, and Rick goes in to talk to him, and they get attacked by some outsiders.
Okay.
They fight the outsiders
Maybe.
off, but the outsiders follow them in to town, and so they have to defend against the outsiders. And Shane and Rick are going out hunting one of the outsiders because Shane is trying to trick Rick into going off with him alone, because Shane now thinks that if he can eliminate Rick, he can get back with Rick's wife.
Oh, okay.
This is all rumor. This is not necessarily what's going to happen. This is what somebody out there is saying. Yeah, I think this is the way it's going to go down. And that because Rick knows what's going on, Rick ends up killing Shane. Shane comes back as a zombie, and then Carl kills the zombie Shane.
Oh, that's dumb.
Kinda undermines-
That's dumb. Boo.
If that's the way it
Anyone who's
happens.
read the comic book will tell you that's the dumbest thing ever.
Well, it's different than the comic book for sure, but it's based around it. It does get us to a situation where Carl has some guilt, maybe not as powerful, and it does get us to a situation where Rick is solo, and that I think that's essential to Rick's ongoing character development.
Well, especially, and again, going back to the comic, there is an extended arc with Rick on his own that is really interesting.
Also premiering in the theaters this week, Journey to the Mysterious Island. Now, The Rock.
This is a funny
No.
ad.
All
The
right.
trailer was cute.
And as we mentioned, Star Wars, The Phantom Menace 3D kicks off all of the Star Wars in order, starting with Episode 1. So not really in order, but sort of in order.
Chronological order.
Yeah, coming in 3D. I'm surprised how not interested I am in going to see this.
Well, there's a. I mean, it's. I don't want to. Adam 12's in the audience. He's not going to like hear this. I would rather do all my laundry than watch The Phantom Menace in any format now. It actively pains me.
I'll watch the. See, I don't feel that strongly. I actually find redeeming value in the Phantom Menace. I think it needs to be about a half hour long, but I don't hate it nearly as much as other people. So I could have. I bought the Blu-ray discs, right? I didn't mind buying them again. I'm interested in seeing the series in 3D. For me, and maybe it's just my demo, I think they should have started with A New Hope. I would be
absolutely
running to the theater.
Everybody would. Are you kidding me? We'd be so super pumped for it.
But by the time The New Hope comes out, after this has been, I think the hype will have worn off, and I don't know if I'll even go see
and
that.
all of 3D will have worn off.
Yeah, right.
There's a good chance.
All right, let's check what we're watching.
So meta.
What we're watching.
Oh,
no, you didn't even go to the shot. You got to do it.
All right,
there you go.
Okay. What we're watching? What are you watching? Well, you were watching Lilyhammer.
Watch Lilyhammer. I'm definitely going to watch the whole rest of the series since I know that all the episodes are out right now. I was surprised that Kick-Ass was on that list of pirated movies because I just randomly on Netflix tricked my wife into watching Kick-Ass. She actually really loved it, and I didn't think I would be able to trick her all the way into it. The key is, and this is the beauty of the iPad, because I would never have television in my bedroom, but it is kind of cool. Like, kind of walk in, and the first, you got to wait for any of these movies. You got to wait till the one part where the guy's talking to the girl, and then just let the missus oversee. That's how I got her to watch Shaun of the Dead too. I'm like, you want to watch Shaun of the Dead? It's supposed to be awesome. It's got zombies. She's like, no. And I started watching it, and I had the earbuds in, and she just saw a guy and a girl having an important conversation at the beginning, and she was like, well, let me hear what they're talking about. And then she ended up loving that as well.
Nice. What else?
Oh, Star Trek The Next Generation. I'm trying to introduce my daughter, but I can't decide the right...
That's a tough one.
Yeah, because I don't want to begin with Encounter at Farpoint, because that's, and plus, like, so I picked one for the second season that I thought was pretty simple. But even then, there's so much, like, flip the polarity of the inertial dampeners, and she's like, Dad, what is happening? I don't even understand.
Yeah, it's hard to get someone introduced to the characters without avoiding the bad episodes of the first season. Maybe that's something people can advise on. I'm trying to think. So, and it's an extra issue because you're trying to introduce a child.
Yes.
So,
but then again, I watched Star Trek when I was a kid.
To introduce is the one where Captain Picard has the memory beam, and he lives someone else's life playing the flute.
That's a weird way to start.
If it's somebody who doesn't love science fiction, it's a great way to say this is about stories. This is about really good stories. But that's not going to work for your kid.
Yeah. I'll start it off on the one where they torture them
where they turn
with
the
lights.
entire Enterprise into children.
Wait, is that a thing?
Yeah.
Is that one?
Yeah.
Oh, dude, I'm so... All right, we got it. That's the one.
All right. I am actually watching all of Star Trek in order.
What, the original series?
Yeah, I'm still watching.
Are you watching like an HD, or are you look? Or I guess not all of those are
on
out yet.
Netflix, it's got the HD versions of the original series, which are essentially restored standard def with high definition graphics. So all the scenes of the ships and the planets and everything are upgraded. So I want to see how that changes the aspect. But I'm also watching them in production order, which I've never done. I've always watched Star Trek: The Original Series out of order. Because I just
because they're all just random. Yeah, sure. Is there like an actual flow to it if you watch them in order? Does it do anything for you? It's an interesting flow because what happened with Star Trek, the original series, they aired them out of production order. And sometimes they knew that was going to happen, and sometimes they didn't. So there's really no one perfect way because there's not a big story arc. Right.
But you start to see production elements change, hairstyles, positioning, different character traits. The introduction of Chekhov when he has like really bad monkey's hair at the very first episode
of the
season, and then they kind of tone it down later in the season. Although, if you had watched it in airing order,
I just
he
realized
suddenly got monkey's hair in the.
You mean the band, the Monkeys?
Yeah,
I was just like, wait, they portrayed him as a chimp because he was Russian. They had to do that.
And also, one thing that I just never really caught on to is how diverse the crew is.
Yeah,
and Star Trek gets a lot of credit for encouraging diversity because of the first interracial kiss and all of that sort of thing. But a lot of times people kind of poo-poo that and they're like, yeah, but Shatner, DeForest Kelley, Leonard Nimoy, all white guys.
Yeah,
all
sure.
right. But the crew that is on deck is you see Southeast Asians, you see Indians, people who never got any screen time in 1967, 1968.
Well, and think about it. I mean, even as, so you got like Uhura, you got Sulu, but even Chekhov was, granted he was just another white guy, but he was a white guy portraying the hated red menace of the Russians.
That is probably my least favorite example because he can't say V's for some reason, which there are plenty of V's in Russian. Vladivostok is a city in Russia that they say Vladivostok.
So this is the equivalent of like Russian blackface that they have.
It kind of is. And then and they overdo the shtick of like, yes, Shakespeare, one of our best Russian authors. Like, come on, Russians aren't that bad. All right. Anyway, also watching Fringe. I thought last week was probably one of the better episodes I've ever seen. They brought Astrid. How far into Fringe?
I've heard the name Astrid.
Well, you know Astrid. she's the.
Here, I'll tell you. You do spoiler alert, and I'll plug my ears. You tell it.
How far are you into Fringe?
I'm still in that second season lull right there, and I'm at that crossroads where I can't decide if I'm supposed to man up and just plow through 40 more episodes of season 2, or watch that.
I will say this that will be a teaser.
Okay,
there are 2 Astrids.
Well, that's already clear. There's 2 of everything.
Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah, that's it. And I also I'm doing this thing where I'm watching on Netflix on my Google TV on my Logitech Review, and then I sit there and I like look up, I'm like, oh, what's that? What's the story behind that? On my iPad, I found something called Star Trek of Gods and Men.
Okay,
which. We've talked about Star Trek Phase 2, The New Voyages, which is a fan-produced finishing the first 5-year mission.
They actually had, you could see Walter Koenig
Star Trek of Gods and Men. It's StarTrekOfGodsAndMen.com. I don't know how I missed this. So I was a couple of years ago, I think 2009, where Walter Koenig, Harriman, who played the captain of the Enterprise B in Star Trek Generations, Nichelle Nichols, Tim Russ from Star Trek Voyager, a bunch of actual Star Trek alumni got together with the Star Trek New Voyages crew and produced this movie, A Star Trek of Gods and Men.
That's awesome.
And it's got time travel elements, and they go into the alternate universe from Star Trek, and it's... I've only watched the first third of it.
Yep.
Because you can download it in 3 parts and watched it. But really, really... if you're a Star Trek fan, a fun fan thing that was approved by Paramount and CBS, said, yeah, we'll let you go do that. Had professional production crew behind it, professional actors donating their time to do it. Just really, really a cool thing.
That is awesome. Now, is it the type of thing that you have to enjoy through the lens of knowing that this was,
Probably. Yeah. If you're not a huge Star Trek fan, you might not like it as much as you would if
it's fair enough. So is it time for feedback?
Now it is time for feedback.
Now it's time for feedback with Brian and Tom on Frame Rate. Oh, yeah.
So we already read the letter from Andros Lee talking about his Super Bowl experience. Why don't you read this one from Yannick right here?
Yannick says, just want to drop you a quick note to mention that I just saw the second series of Sherlock is now available on the Canadian iTunes store. Unfortunately, it does not seem to have crossed into the U.S. yet from what I could see if I switched my country. But at least now you can just drive to Canada instead of flying across the Atlantic to legally buy them.
Okay, so we also got an email from a guy named Morton. He wrote like 8 paragraphs.
Wow.
It was a manifesto because remember 2 weeks ago we talked about the moral conundrum, the difference between what's legal and what's ethical. Is it more ethical to use a VPN to access a legal way to watch something overseas, or is it more I figured it was a slam dunk. Well,
which I said not legal, violates terms of service, but probably one of the more on the border things.
Yeah, no, I think so.
It brought up the license fee and the fact that you don't pay the license fee.
Yeah, now, and I misremembered when I said it. I said, because I was thinking of the Hulu experience where you go and, your view is counted, you watch the ads and all that stuff. Mort sent a very long letter explaining, like, hey, jerk, there are no ads on iPlayer, and that's paid for out of my license fees. So, and it's designed to serve the 20 million UK subscribers, not the 300 million American pirates. So why don't you do us a favor and just torrent it next time instead of stealing my...
Wait. So his ultimate solution is...
His exact quote here is... His exact quote, you're like, please, next time, please torrent Sherlock instead of piggybacking on the iPlayer and encouraging other Americans to do so as well.
First of all, the iPlayer should be able to handle a bunch of people coming in from overseas if it's well designed at all. But we'll leave that aside.
But it's
if you were to pay the license fee,
I would love to. I would, as a
would
foreigner.
That work?
Yes, anybody
if
take
you
my
were
money.
To set up a sling box in a friend in the UK and use that, and you're not even affecting iPlayer, then would that work? Because they're paying the license fee.
That's somebody somewhere is paying a license fee, and I will pay that person. And that brings up this whole like weird gray area. Because then I started thinking, like, what is piracy? Is it piracy when let's say I'm getting my friend's Wi-Fi and I'm able to use the Time Warner app on my iPad? Even though I don't have a Time Warner, but I'm able to watch TV on his. I mean, it's just, 15 feet. Is that piracy? Well, maybe yes, but what if I sit on his front porch and do it? Is that piracy? Or it's like, why is it not piracy? Why would it be piracy for me to watch Game of Thrones in my house, but not piracy if I walk 10 feet over and watched it in his living room? I'm still watching the content and not paying for it. It's agonizingly frustrating.
It's because we have set up these rules based on a series of conditions that no longer exist.
Yes. And an expectation that no longer exists, and a content universe that's no longer applicable.
All right, is it time for our Game of Thrones segment?
Oh my gosh, not anymore. Guys, I'm begging you, please. Enough. He's probably not even going to hear this because we said Game of Thrones. Enough with Game of Thrones already. I get it. You like it. This is why I stopped listening to Sword and Laser 2 years ago.
And haven't gone back.
Oh, in your face.
By the way, we haven't talked about Game of Thrones on Sword and Laser much.
I have many problems.
You've missed out the not talking about it.
I have many problems with the Game of Thrones and the author himself, which I will not go into here, but just can't listen to this again. I love you guys when things blah, 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 blah. James, let me just point out that we were not going to mention Game of Thrones until your letter showed up.
Oh, Streisand effect.
What a twist.
All right, look, we do it with The Walking Dead. He doesn't seem to mind that.
Well,
we do it with shows that we're passionate about, and we figure because it's the internet and you can download it and consume it in whatever way you want, because we're not one of those people that structures it and says you need to watch it this way. You can fast forward past the parts you don't like.
Yeah, we even put up I guess we'll have a Game of Thrones drop or something like warning.
We're going to talk about Game of Thrones. We were doing it at the end of the episode.
Yeah,
we're like spoiler alert, Walking Dead, spoiler alert, Game of Thrones.
All right, we want to hear from you guys, so hit us up at framerateshow@gmail.com. That's framerateshow@gmail.com. Give us more of these ethical conundrums. I think these are really interesting. I like these weird, like, which is more or less, and chime in on what you guys think.
Right, and let James know that it's safe until April 1st to watch Sword and Laser. That's it for this episode of Frame Rate, or listen to it. We will see you next week.
You can watch it.
Twit.tv/FR.
Watch it download.
Oh, and by the way, you can watch Frame Rate live every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern Time.
Should have more people here live.
Yeah, come join.
Tuesdays.
There's good folks like Captain Kipper in there. Stephen 3X.
Poco.
Stan Locke.
Stephen 3X.
Monkey Stick.
Captain Kipper.
Already said it.
I'm awesome. I'm awesome.
He made you say it.